All right, I'm back. We're still there? No, Steve doesn't it. You know what? I'm going to switch to a wired connection. I'm not going to use my Wi-Fi anymore. All right, give me everybody 5 minutes. I'll be right back. I'll be use of wired connection. Sorry about that.
We can't hear you if you're talking.
I think he said he'll be back in 5 minutes.
All right, I'm back. Let me do another run. Ooh, nice. Share my screen. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, let me share my screen again. There we go. Okay, so can you see my screen? All right.
Yep.
Okay, let me run the speed test again. Look at that. Now that's fast. Okay, we shouldn't have an issue now. That's awesome. All right. Okay, sorry about that. Bring up the chat again. Chris, wow. Yeah, sorry about that. I was in the downstairs in the basement, and I guess that won't work. Okay. No, I'll just do it wired from now on. All right, so let's keep going. I was saying that everything you see here on the left-hand side, is the graphical representation, right, of what we see on the right-hand side, the DOM. And this tool here obviously is only meant for developers like us, right? This is not meant for the end user, right? The end user never sees this. Right? The end user only sees the left-hand side. But us as developers, this is where we're going to be living most of our time, right? Is on this right-hand side, right? Generating this HTML, either statically or dynamically, right? Using templates and using databases and using all sorts of techniques. That's the intent of this course, is how is it that we write this? How is this generated? And what does it mean? Okay, there's a question in the chat. Can I borrow your internet? Is a DOM just a whole HTML code? Yes, the DOM. So we have to understand that HTML is just text, okay? Is the text that we write by hand, or also it's HTML that we generate dynamically, right? We could write a program that dynamically writes the HTML for us, okay? And that's how it used to be for more than a decade, right? That where servers like PHP, Python, JSP, ASPs, all those techniques, those were programs that ran on the server, and following certain algorithms would write this text for us, right? They would do some database queries, they would have some algorithms, some programs that would run, and they would generate this text for us, right? So the file would come. The browser would read the HTML document, the text document, and would parse it and create this model of objects, this hierarchical object model, right, in memory. So all browsers do this, right? And so this in-memory representation is what we refer to as the DOM. Right? So we need to understand the distinction, right? HTML is just a text, right? The DOM is the interpretation that browsers have of that text. Make sense? It's a little bit different, right? Because if you remember last time we met, right, HTML, we made a couple of errors and mistakes, yes? And the browser, in all its wisdom, figured out that, hey, no, you got this, you got that, you misspelled this is the wrong place. So the parser, right, that parses our bad HTML is so good that it will reinterpret it correctly, right, and make certain guesses of what you meant. Okay, it says, could you please give a real-life analogy of the differences between DOM and HTML? Sure, we did that. Let's see, last week, right? We wrote this index file, right? This index file, we wrote this, right? This is the text that we write. Okay. Now browsers can interpret this and generate the DOM for us. Okay, so for instance, I can say run this, right? And it opens it up, and there it is. So the browser parsed our HTML document. This is our HTML document. Okay, and then which is just plain text, And when I told the browser to interpret it, it drew this. I noticed that it left out, all of this stuff. It made this really bold and big letters, that's what H1 means. Also, this heading is H2, so it's a little smaller, right? So the browser parsed my text file, my HTML file, okay, and it generated this DOM. There it is. This is the DOM objects, right? You can look at the text. You look at the text. You can look at the source. This is the text that was downloaded. The text was downloaded here, right? and this is the DOM that it generated. Okay, right now they look almost the same, identical, right? We have the doc type, we have the doc type, right? We have the hlang, head, meta, blah, 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 h1. So this is the text, and this is the parse version. This is the parse, what it understands, right? They look almost the same, right? It looks almost identical. But notice that if I close this, right, and I put say I put h1, right, I put it in the wrong place, right, I put it in the header, okay, and I re-render this. Notice that it still renders. Notice that the text, if I ask for the text, what is the text that came down? Look at the text. Notice that h1 is it's in the wrong place. It's in the head. See that? But the parser is smart enough to say, no, that can't be. That's not what you really meant. So the document object that it creates, notice that it's h1 is not in the head. See that? It puts it back in the h1 under the body where it's supposed to be, right? So it's one is the text, right? The other one is the interpretation of that text. Okay, let's see a question here. Could you please, does each HTML file corresponds to a DOM model? They are in one-to-one relation. Yes, correctly. Yes. Now so one HTML document will generate one DOM. Yes. Now it starts getting weirder. Okay, it starts to get weird in some documents, right? So for instance, let's take a look at this is the slide, right? Google Slides. So if I right click on this, right, notice that it's not even letting me run my inspect. Okay, it's not even letting me do that. Okay, there it is. I can do an inspect here. Okay, if I do an inspect, you would expect maybe a div on the left hand side, right? If you do an inspect, a lot of the content here was dynamically generated. All this content is dynamically generated. Just tons and tons of scripts everywhere. Lots and lots of scripts, right? And most of this most of this content here was dynamically generated. So there starts to happen that there is a less and less of a relationship of the HTML that comes from the server and what actually gets rendered. Okay, because what gets downloaded in more advanced HTML that we will start looking at in a couple of weeks, we'll see that the HTML that comes back is just one line, right? And so that's all it was downloaded. And then when you go see the DOM, it's a huge DOM, right? And then you start scratching your head. Well, wait a minute, only a small piece of text came back from the server, but where does all this DOM come from? And it's because the DOM it was more typically was dynamically generated, right? Programmatically generated. Okay, and we see that we can manually change it, but we'll see how we can programmatically change it in a few weeks. All right, let's see. There's a question. DOM is a representation of a structure that browser generates parts from the DOM. Yeah, exactly. Only lives locally. Yes, the DOM only lives locally, exactly. Whereas the HTML lives on the server, way back in the server, right? And the browser goes and fetches or asks the server for this document, gets downloaded and copied locally on our file system, right? We also might download some scripts as well, right? And some styling sheets, right? We run that on the browser, and then the browser can dynamically render this document for us. Okay. All right. Excellent. Great questions. All right. Okay. Let's keep going then. Let me close this. I'll close it now. There's so much. Let me close it. There we go. Yeah, so remember the way you can see this here is you can right click and say inspect. Okay, If you're on a Mac, the inspect option might not be available right away. You need to go into settings, and in settings, you need to turn on developer tools, because these are tools that us developers use, right? Usually, this would not be. This is kind of like behind the curtain. This is what Neo and Matrix would see, right? Neo doesn't see the pretty, the pretty world with the trees and the buildings and whatnot. What Neo sees is it's the reality. The reality is this right-hand side. What's behind, what's actually generating that that pretty world. Okay. Yeah. Let's keep going. Right. So HTML. We talked about HTML plenty. We saw some of these tags, right? This HTML, this head. There's comments. Comments allow you to just like any programming language, right? It allows you to leave a note to yourself so you can come back later, right? We created headings, right? We created lists. Last time we met, we saw that there were two types of lists, right? The ordered list and the unordered list. We created tables. Tables allows us to create rows and columns, right? The original intent was for Tim Berners-Lee was that he was writing research papers, right? And so he wanted to be able to display the results of his research in tabular format. So he came up with a table tag, right? That allows you to create rows and columns, right? You can have a head, you can have a body. So the head is where you can have the headers of the columns, right? And the body is where you have the main content of the rows. And for instance, here you have a head that has one row, and the row then has two columns, right? And then the data would actually live inside of the body of the table, T body, right? And so we have here Alice and Alice in Wonderland, right? So here we have one single row representing Alice here, and you can have a number of rows, right? And I think we showed you some examples of that last time we met, right? We created paragraphs, right? We created the lists, the ordered lists and the unordered lists. We created a table. Here's a table that we play around with on last time we met, right? So we have the table, we have the head that has one row and has 4 columns, right? Quiz, topic, date, and grade, right? So we put this on the right-hand side. We can take a look at how this rendered. I think it was this one, no? No, that wasn't it. Yes, this one. So the table, I think it's over here. There's our table, right? So there's quiz, topic, date, and grade. So quiz, topic, date, and grade. And then we close the head. So that's the head. This row over here. And then we have the body of the table, which is these 3 rows down here. So we have 3 rows. There they are. There's 1 row, second row, and third row. And then the first row has 4 columns, which is Q1, HTML, right? The date, and then 85. See that? And then we have a second row with 4 columns, and they are. Okay. And then the very last row over here, we didn't actually use the body. We actually use the footer, the T foot. And the foot can also have multiple rows. We just have 1 row here. Right? We have 1 row that has 2 columns. One of the columns spans 3 columns. So there it is. See that? Notice that we don't have a line, a border between columns 1, 2, and 3, right? Because this average here, right? This average here is spanning across 3 columns. So you can span across columns. You can also span across rows. Okay. And then the very last column has 90. Make sense? We then play around with a couple other things. We play around with the image tag that we can go and fetch an image from the internet, right? And download it to our local file system, right? It gets downloaded, copied to the cache of the browser, right? It doesn't, you never actually see the file, right? And the file is way down over here. There it is. Starship gap2.jpg. Right? JPEG is a very common image format, right? Oh, there it is. So, and then it's 400 pixels wide. So there's our image, right, of SpaceX Starship, folks, working on it. Then we wanted to download an image, right, and use it locally, like Tesla bot. I don't believe we did that, but I guess I can demonstrate real quick. We can say we can look for Tesla bot image. We can look for images and say how about this one? We can click here and we can say maybe download this. Save image as. And let's save it. Let's see, documents, new webdev 2021. Maybe it's down here. Where do I have my project? The project is where? Let's see. Januzzi, NEU 2021. Fall, Januzzi. Oh, okay, none. Sorry. There we go. So yeah, so it's actually Januzzi and you. Where are you? There you go. And you 2021 fall webdev. There it is. Webdev. We're going to go into public. Assignment 2, practice, and download it here. So I'll call it Tesla bot. Okay, so we should be able to see it here. There it is, teslabot.jpg. So JPEG. So let's call it JPEG. There it is. Let's save that. That should work, right? There it is. Yeah. So let's refresh our screen. Notice that it was broken because I didn't have an image before, right? If I do Control R, right there it is. There's my Tesla bot. Okay. All right. So I think we had stopped when we started talking about forms. Right? So let's talk about forms. Let's see, any questions on the chat? Where is the chat? My chat professor, can you chat a little bit? Let's see, how can we create our own HTML tags? It's possible. Yes, we will be creating our own HTML tags using React.js. React.js allows you to create your own entirely brand new set of tags. Okay, professor, can you chat a little bit about how this fits into full stack engineering, how backend languages communicate with React and HTML? Yes, we talked about that very briefly last time. Let me just talk about that just real quick. I think it was web development. Yeah, so web development, we talked about the architecture, right? So the architecture is, this is what we're building. Okay, this is where we are. Okay, we have the client server architecture. Right now, we're going to be focusing mostly on this layer right here, right? We have the browser. The browser is connecting to a server. The server right now happens to be running locally on my machine, right? When we deploy this on Netlify, then actually my browser is talking to a Netlify server, right? The server is running on some domain, right? But as I develop, as a software developer, my server is running locally in my machine. And so yeah, so the browser is talking to the server, and and we refer to whatever is running on the server, we refer to it as the middle tier. Okay, and this could be any number of servers. It could be a JBoss if you're using Java as a middle tier. It could be Tomcat. It could be Node. We're going to be creating a Node server for ourselves. Okay, the middle tier server, and then the Node server is going to need to access data that is stored permanently. For that, we're going to be using a database. And the database could be, again, it could be a relational database, could be a non-relational database. We're going to be using Mongo, the non-relational database Mongo. Okay, and so being a full stack engineer means that you feel comfortable and confident at either working on the client side, working on the server, right, working in the database, right, and that you can seamlessly create any artifact anywhere in the stack. Okay, that you feel just as comfortable creating a React.js component on the client side that's going to run on the browser just as much as you're happy at creating a Node.js web service that can respond in XML or can respond in JSON. It can respond in can generate any response, and you feel perfectly fine at opening a connection to a database server, making a query, either a SQL query or doing a Node.js connection with collections, right? And then how to parse that, generate a response and send it back to the client, right? So a full stack engineer feels confident, all across this entire technology stack. Let's see. I guess how can we create our unrelated? For those of us who have seen Westworld, don't the Tesla bots look a bit too familiar? I guess I was asking if there was more detail you could provide beyond this. If there was specific software design pattern. Oh yes, we'll see plenty of those throughout the semester. Yes. All throughout we're going to be introducing best practices on how to build software and how not to build software, and why are we choosing a particular format. Now, what's the difference between relational and non-relational database? We'll cover non-relational databases when we get there, but there's a whole course that talks about databases, which I also teach, 3200 or 5200, which I'll be happy to talk, or maybe during office hours we can go there. Relational stuff, blah, 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 tables. Yeah, this is not it. Yeah, we're not going to do that just yet. Okay, yes, questions. Yeah, but great question. But I love to talk about this, but offline. It's not part of the. We will talk about non-relational when we get to Mongo and why we using that instead of a relational database, and how would you choose one versus the other, but not just yet. Yeah, so there you have it. So this course is the intent of this course is that by the end of this course you should feel comfortable anywhere in the stack, right? That gets you going as a full stack engineer, right? Where you'll be just as happy working in the client on the front end as just as happy working in the middle tier or anywhere in between. Okay. All right. So let's get back to where we were. So yeah. So let's spend some time in forms. So we started to talk about forms. So forms is going to be a set of tags that allows us to interact with the user, right? Allowing them to type in data and edit data in all sorts of data types, right? You can have them just type in just plain text, right? Maybe just a single line of text, or we can give them a widget where they can drop down and select a date or time. We want them to be able maybe to use a drop down where they can select a single element, a single field, or a multi-list where they can select multiple options. Right, we want to be able for them to click buttons and invoke certain actions to execute. We want them to be able to select radio buttons, check boxes, sliders, all sorts of elements that allow us to ask the user for input. Okay, so as part of the assignment, right, we had asked you to play around with that a little bit, right? And the assignment is, this one is due next Thursday, right? And we had already started working on this, right? On Tuesday, we already started working on this. I see a question in the chat. Can you talk how long it takes to update DOM? I have heard obtaining virtual DOM. Yes, when we get to React.js, we will talk about the virtual DOM. Yes, not just yet. It's a little bit too early. Right, so we had created a couple of input fields. Let's get to that down here. There we go. So let's talk about forms. It's very, very important. It's going to be the way that we ask for information from the user. And the most basic element or HTML tag is the input form, input elements, okay? And like the name suggests, is so that you can enter data in it, okay? There's quite a few different types of input fields, and you can tell it what type you want right here. The default type of an input field is text. Okay, text meaning you can enter anything, numbers, characters, special characters, whatnot. You can enter into the input field. Okay, text. There's a whole bunch of other types, right? There's checkboxes, there's radio buttons, just plain old buttons. There's sliders. There's we'll see them. There's dates, email, number. There's a whole bunch of them. We'll see in a minute. You can also provide a placeholder. Placeholder is what you might see sometimes, when you're logging in, and they might give you like a hint of what is that you're asking them to enter, right? They'll give you like an example, like if you're asking for an email, right? You'll give an example of an email, right? So just to give them some hints. Chat. Chat. Okay. Can everybody hear me? Everything's still good?
Yep.
Okay, great. Okay, another attribute of the input field is the title, right? Now the title in different elements means different things, right? But the title attribute in the input field means or behaves like a tooltip, right? It's what, if you hover over that input field, right, it will pop up that tiny little dark box giving you another type of hint. So together, the placeholder and the title help you give the user some idea of what it is that you want them to do with that input field. Okay. Also, these are all optional. Okay. And then you have another optional attribute, the value attribute. So the value attribute allows you to give a default value for that input field. Okay. So let's take a look at some examples here. Right. So I believe we had copied this into our index. Yeah, we had copied this. There we go. So we had copied this. Now we're going to be using the form tag. The way we're going to be using these input fields, we don't really need the form tag, and I would encourage you not to even use the form tag. Right? The form tag made sense early on when HTML just came out, and the way the architecture works. It was what the form did is that all the fields inside of the form, when you submit the form, right? Usually there's a button here to submit the form. What the form tag would do is that it would collect all the data that you filled out in the form. It would parse it, it would encode it, right? And then it would send it off to wherever you wanted to, wherever it was supposed to go in the server, and the server would process all this data. Yes? Well, we're not going to be using that mechanism anymore, right? That's a little bit legacy mechanism, right? Instead, we're going to be doing it ourselves, right? Instead of letting the form and letting the browser do this default behavior, we're going to be handling that ourselves using JavaScript. Okay, so we don't really need the form. Perhaps you might even do a div, just to capture all the fields in one single place. Maybe you might want to put a div, but not even that, right? But just for just for legacy purposes, I will still use the form from time to time, but in reality, we don't really need it. Okay, so then here's a couple examples of a few input fields. I'm just going to separate this so it makes it a little bit easier to read. Okay, and so what we have here is a combination of label and input field. Label and input field. See that? Okay. Now you can guess at what they do, right? The label, like the name suggests, is declaring a piece of text as kind of like giving you a hint of what comes next, right? So if you notice the way this renders,
Professor, I think your screen is frozen.
my screen is frozen. Okay, I see. Yeah, let me. Yeah, I think Zoom crashed on me. Let me restart Zoom. Okay, just a second. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Live transcript is available. Is it not transcribing? All right. I think somebody needs to request transcriptions, or how do you hide narrative, custom live stream. I'm not sure. Live transcript, is that what it is? Assign someone to transcript. Disable now. Okay.
I think subscript is on though. Transcription
It
is
is?
on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, okay. Hide floating meeting controls. Is that it? All right, yeah. So yeah, you have these text fields here. That's being rendered by this right here. So let's put this maybe side by side. Yeah, so this is the form, the label, which is this label here. And you have the input field, which is this input field right here. See that? Let me make this a little bit easier to read. There we go. Right, there we go. All right, so this placeholder, see this placeholder? It says JDO. That's what it is. See this grayed out here? That's what it says. So if I type something, whatever I type in there, right? If I refresh, there it is. See that? So that's kind of like a hint of what it is that I'm expecting you to type. Okay. Say, your username. Right. If I refresh, there it is. Your username. Right. I can give them more hints by you putting the title. I can say title. Right. I can say, like maybe this is your username. Okay. So if I refresh now, if I hover, notice that it puts that little black box to give you an idea that that's what you want me to type in there. Make sense? Okay. Also notice that if I click on the username here, if I click on it, notice that the input box gets a focus, right? It puts the cursor right there so I can start typing, right? The way that happens, that looks like the label is somehow related to the input field, right? And the way we accomplish that is by relating the label with the input field using the for and the ID. See that? So the ID, we give it a unique identifier. There it is, right? That's what ID means, unique identifier, right? And then the for is referring to that unique identifier. It's saying that this label here, okay, is for that input field over here, right? And the magic happens that if I click on the username, right, though that field gets a focus. So that's maybe not as important for big screens, right? I can move the cursor very easily. I can just click there. Maybe it's marginally easier if you make it, a bigger clickable area. But it's definitely very, very important, like for small screens, right? Like phones or tablets, right? Where you're not using the mouse that has very precision movement, but you're using your finger, right? So to make it easier for folks that are using smaller devices, right? It's strongly recommended, right? It's best practice. There you go, right? We're gonna have lots and lots of these best practices, right? It's best practice to increase the clickable area as much as possible, right? And the way we do that is by putting a label and associating with the input field, okay? And I'm sure there's gonna be a question on the quiz, right? That's gonna ask you about labels and input fields and how do you relate them, right? I'm gonna try and trick you. I'm going to put here another field. I'm going to say name or label or something, right? I'm going to try and trick you. So make sure that you practice this here in the assignment and you follow along, right? And what the title is and what the placeholder is, please, just remember what they are for. There's another input field here, right? Which in the same thing, right? We have the for, we have the password here, right? And I'm putting this all this in every new line. Okay, so there's the label, which is this label here, the input field, the password, and here I'm putting a value, but it doesn't really matter for this one. Notice that the type here is password. See that? Here the type was text. Oh, notice that we didn't even use text for the input field. I didn't have to say type equal text because that is the default type. Just you typing any other value, right? You can just type anything there, okay? So by default is text. but I can override the default by specifically telling it what type I want. Like for instance, I'm saying here that is type password, right? And what that does is that it allows me to hide the text that is actually typed in there. Notice that I can type, it doesn't show it to me, right? Again, that's so that making sure that if somebody is over your shoulder is looking to see what is that you're typing, right, that they don't see what you're typing. Okay, so that's the password. I only added the value here just to illustrate, right, that that values are hidden. Okay. All right. So here's first name. First name. I am for first name. I am using explicitly saying that this is text, even though that's the default anyway. Right. Notice I'm saying type text. Well, it's the I am illustrating the fact that this is probably the John is the tooltip. So if I hover over first name, notice that John comes up. See that? John, there it is. For last name, it's also text, and placeholder is Doe. Notice that the placeholder is Doe, meaning it's giving me a hint of what it is that I want to type, some name like Doe, right? But it's giving you initial value of Wonderland. So you don't see Doe here until you delete Wonderland. And then once you delete all the content, notice that the text Doe pops up, right? In gray in gray color, again, giving you an idea of what it is I expect you to type. Make sense? Oops. All right, so let's continue. Let's see the assignments. That's not. Where'd the assignment go? Let's see something in the chat. I can see live chat. Okay. I have also seen name as an attribute in the input field. Is there any difference between name and that title? Yeah. So the title is used to give you a tooltip. Okay. Name, which we'll see the what it's useful for, but name here is somewhat not necessary. Okay. Here you would put maybe it almost might play the same part as an ID. So you might even use the same name for as the ID. Okay. Names were very important when we used to submit the form because the way it encoded the data that was sent over to the server, it was encoded using the name, right? So if, for instance, if I typed John, right, for my first name, right, what the server would get would be whatever the name I chose and then the value of whatever I typed. So it would say, first name and then the data John, whatever I typed in there. Okay. Today, because we are not using the default behavior of forms, right, we're building the data ourselves. The name has less importance. It will have a very big importance when we get to radio buttons and checkboxes in a minute, right? We'll see that in a second. Let's see, question in the chat. What is the difference between alt and title? I remember when, yeah, so alt is when, for instance, if something is not available, and for instance, an image or something, you can give like an alternate text that would be rendered if the image is not rendered. It also allows you to specify the order which when you press tab, it allows you to establish the order in which it's going to go from one element to the other. But we're not going to be using alt. Let's see. I had the assignment here. I don't know what happened. Oh, there it is. Here's the assignment. Let me just bring that up like that. There we go. And let me go back to my rendering. There we go. Here. Okay. Question in the chat. I think ID is used for referencing in JS name. Actually, with JavaScript, you can reference anything using IDs, name, CSS, whatever. Right? Yeah, you can really do anything you want with JavaScript. All right, so let's continue. We'll see that there are other types of form elements. Let's copy these. Let's paste it here at the bottom. I'm going to copy the rest down here, like the instructions say. There we go. Paste it, and let's go over a couple of these. Okay. So there's just a couple. Let's see how they render. See the rendering? There we go. See the other fields. So I wanted to illustrate these other fields that allow you to work with other data types like email, numbers, range, like sliders, right? And also dates, right? Date pickers. So the way we do that is that here we have the email. Let's get the email. So we have the label for the email, right? Which is this right here. Notice that we are using the for that connects to this ID, so that when you click on this label, it highlights this ID, this input field right here. We know that already. The only difference here that is of interest here is that we have type equal email, right? That's very important. It's email. What you're saying here is that you will only accept valid emails, right, for this input field. Okay. So what this will do is that it's going to ask the browser, right, that as you type, make sure to validate that you're typing a valid email. This doesn't mean an email that the browser knows about. Right? They won't know if j.annunziato@northeastern.edu is an actual email. The only thing that it'll do is that it'll make sure that you have a username, you have an @sign, and you have a domain. Right? It won't actually validate whether this email is actually true or correct. Right? It only validates that the syntax is correct. Okay. It's also important, not as much on desktop applications, but definitely on mobile applications, because if you click on an element that is using the type email, the browser or the application is going to pop up for you the email keyboard. Right, very important. The email keyboard, okay, which is going to remove any invalid characters, right? It'll put the @sign right there so you can actually type. It just makes this much more convenient for the phones and the tablets. Okay, same thing for numbers, right? For numbers, right? If you say type number, that means here it is number. The browser is going to force you to type a number. Listen, notice that I can't type, for instance, any other letter. I can only type just numbers. See that? That's also very convenient, right? To make sure that users are entering correct data. You should always use the form elements that are strongly typed, right? That they should be the type of whatever it is that you are expecting, right? Don't use just text, right? Because if it's you're expecting a number and you make a text, then you're allowing folks to enter bad data in there. So don't do that. Looks like there's a question in the chat. Who is doing the validation on the data? The browser. Yeah, no, the browser is doing it. Yes. You could also do validation yourself using JavaScript. That's as well. We would need that if, for instance, highlight stuff and want to change the border or do some color or pop up message. You would do that using JavaScript. The browser does some very minimal validation. But the great part of this is actually the keyboard, right? And especially at phones and tablets. Okay, that for instance, if you make the type number, right, on the keyboard for your mobile device, right, it'll pop up the number keyboard, right? I mean, don't you hate it when you have to fill out a form and you get to, I don't know, balance or deposit numbers, right? And obviously it's expecting a number, and on the keyboard it gives you the full keyboard. That's just painful, right? And good applications would give you the correct keyboard that you actually need to enter the value, right? So yeah, so definitely always use the strongly typed input fields. Right. So here's another one. Type range, right? Like the name suggests, it's for sliders, right? It allows you to do a slider. Okay. Now, and the type is range, and it renders as a slider. Same thing with the IDs. I guess placeholder means nothing here because it doesn't render any text here. Okay, so probably placeholder here, you don't need it. Let's see this question on the chat. We should always add value for a particular input field. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Here I'm just showing you how to set an initial value. More typically, what we're going to be using is React.js, right? That is going to go fetch data from the server or from somewhere, right? And it's going to populate the value dynamically and set it programmatically using JavaScript. instead of you manually typing value equal 4. We don't have that just yet, okay? But this is what you would do. Okay. Notice that for we, if we render this, notice that it starts off at 5 or no 4 out of a total value, max value of 5. See that? We're saying the max value is 5 and the value is 4. So that's why it's not all the way to the right hand side. Okay. We can set the value maybe to 2. Yeah, save it and then refresh and notice that it becomes less. Okay. And you can also set a minimum. You set a minimum. The minimum is 1, right? And the maximum is 5. So I render it. And so that's a 1 here, and that's a 5. So you can set whatever range it is, right? So like 3 to 5 or something like that. And so there's 4 values, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. There's 4 values between 5, 1, and 5. Yes. Let's see. What else? Just like I can set min and max for the range, I can also set a min and max for the number, right? So I can say here, value is 100, but the maximum is 200, right? So that means that it would not allow me. So if I go to 199, if I go, I can go down, I can go up, but I can't go further than 200. See that? It's enforcing the fact that I cannot go above 200. I can also say minimum also, min equals 50, same thing, right? It will not allow me to go, if I go 30, right? It's not letting me change it, right? Notice that if I try to go down below 50, it won't let me. Okay. Yeah, some nice validation. It's always a good practice to give the user to reduce the options, right? Reduce, no, not the options, but reduce the cases in which the user can make a mistake when they enter data. Okay. Let's see, question on the chat. Can I add text below or above rating so that the user can see which value it is? Yes, but we need JavaScript for that. We can't do it just yet. But placeholder could still be 1,000. The placeholder, yeah, the placeholder is just a grayed out area. Yeah, and it's your responsibility to make sure that you don't give a placeholder that's misleading, right? Okay, rating, and then finally we have dates, and so the date again, input type date, and what that does is that it renders here a widget that allows you to graphically, select a date, right? So 20, and there it is, right? You notice that it renders it. You can also do this by hand. You can go use the arrow keys to go up and down, and the tabs to go and change these individually, right? Okay. Now the value that gets generated, that actually you can read the value from all these fields, or from all these fields you can read the value. You need JavaScript. You don't know that yet, right? But the format of this date input field is peculiar, right? And you will be asked in some quizzes, what is a format for dates, right? And this is a universal date format, which is going to be starting with year dash month dash day. Okay, that is the standard format of the dates. Okay, in JavaScript. Everybody good? All right, let's keep going. Let's see. Let's go back to the assignments. Where does that go? There we go. Let's talk about text boxes. So text boxes is when if you want to be able to enter long form information like a bio, right, or your resume, right? So, things that might be several paragraphs long, right? And so certain things that you can configure is how wide you want the text box and how tall you want the text box. You can also have the placeholder and the tooltip. Now, one peculiar thing about the text area is that the default value, unlike the other fields, you can say when you can say value equal and then the default value. Here we do not use the attribute value. Instead, the data is in between, is in the body of the elements, right? Instead of text, right? So let's see an example. We just copy it here, copy, and let's minimize this. Let's copy it down here. this is all part of the homework, right? You're expected to complete this on your own. Right, so we're doing it here just to review. There it is. So the biography and the text, and it's 30 columns, so 30 characters wide and 10 characters tall. I can make this a little smaller. So we say 20 characters. I can refresh. Notice that it shrinks. Yes. Also notice that by default it gives you this hover here that allows you to resize the text area. That's by default a feature of the text area, which you can resize, which is pretty cool. Okay, it also gives you the scroll bars and whatnot. Okay. But notice that the data, the actual text that is being rendered, right, is in between the opening tag, right, and the closing tag at the end. See that? All right. Actually, I guess this should go. No, this, no, that. Just want this. Okay. Let's keep going. Let's give the assignment. Buttons allows us to interact. We can just have a plain old simple button that you can click. Right, like that. There's a button, and I can click it. Notice that it's not doing anything just yet. Okay. Now, by default, the button is of type submit, I believe, right? Where it submits the form, right? But we don't want the notice that this button, because it's inside of the form, the default behavior is that it wants to submit the form. Okay. We don't want it to do that, right? So it's behaving as the type is submit. See that? Right? But we don't want that to be the default behavior. We're never ever going to submit a form in this class, right? The way we're going to do it is using JavaScript. JavaScript is going, when you click on a button, a script is going to run. It's going to gather all the information. It's going to do some validation. It's going to package it and format it, and it's going to send it off to a server. We're going to do that all manually, right? We're not going to rely on the form to do that for us. So yeah, the default behavior is to submit the form. We don't want to do that, so we can replace it with button, right? And then if you refresh, refresh, we go down, we click on me, notice that it's not submitting the form anymore. Okay, so yeah, type button. There we go, excellent. So let's keep going. Let's look at another button, right? Another very popular type of button is our drop downs. Let's take a look at our drop downs. Let's copy that. Let's look it over. Oops. There we go. Let's refresh, see what that looks like. There it is. So this one is a select one, right? Select one drop down. Whereas this one down here is a list from which you can select several using the control button, right? The control key, right? You can select several. Whereas this one is meant to select just one, right? So let's look at both of them and how they work. Also notice that by default, if I click on this, notice that by default science fiction is selected, and whereas here we have comedy and science fiction by default are selected. So let's look at how that is implemented. Let's go like that. So the way this is implemented is that they're both implemented using the select field, the select tag, right? Not the input tag, right? The input tag can do a lot of things, right? You can do radio buttons and checkboxes and input fields and date pickers and email, and it can do a lot of things, but it can't do the drop downs. So for the drop down specifically, you have to use a dedicated tag called the select tag. Okay, and the way it works is that the select tag is a parent tag that then has several children, right? And these children are the option tags, where you can list all the different options from which you can choose. Okay, so we can choose, for instance, from comedy, drama, science fiction, and fantasy, and that's exactly what we have here. See that? Those are the values indeed that are listed here. Okay, but notice that these are the pieces of text that the user sees. Okay, but behind the scenes, right, we might want the value, the actual value that we might want to send over to the server. Okay, maybe be some kind of token, right? Some value that might mean to something to a database. Whereas this text might look pretty to a human user, right, because it's easy to read. Okay, the actual data that we might want to send over to a database or a server or whatnot, these are the actual values. If you select comedy here, the actual value of the input field will be all capital comedy. Make sense? Now, because this, we need to distinguish between this and this, even though they might look the same or have the same spelling and whatnot. This is for human consumption. This is what the human sees, right? You might put here some comments or something that might be useful for the user, right? Maybe you might say my favorite or something, my favorite genre, right? And that might be funny or something for the audience, right? You might say haha, right? Whereas you might say boo hoo, whatever, right? And so if I re-render that, notice that those options are there, right? But they're meant for human consumption, right? We are spending our time on the matrix, right? On the other side of the curtain, right? We need to talk to a server. We need to talk to a database, right? We're not going to send this, this crappy, human readable form, right? We need to normalize the data, right, into some tokens or valid values that we can validate, right? So the actual data, right, it will be some token, some capital, whatever that means something in some table row. Got it? Also notice that one of them has the attribute selected on. See that? And so this selected is what, if I refresh, notice that it is the default selection. See that? It's highlighted in science fiction. That is the default value of this input field is sci-fi. Make sense? Now, in the regular select, just like this out of the box, right, the default is that you can only have one selected value, okay? You can also have a multiple select, right, where instead of just having 4 options of which you can select only one, instead we can change it to a multiple selector where you can click on several, right, and highlight the ones you want using the control key, right? And so the example that I have here is that, hey, maybe you don't just want to select one genre. Maybe you want to select multiple genres. Maybe you're eclectic. You like a lot of things. Yes. So we can select 2 here. So the only difference here is that I've added the multiple, right? And then we have 2 are selected at the same time, and there they are. They're highlighted. Of course, you can go back and change your mind and select all of them and whatnot using the control key. Make sense? Any questions? All right, so then there's the another button that will be useful a little later. We're not gonna use any of these fields just yet, right? None of these examples actually work. We're just retrieving data. But one of them that is going to be useful a little later is being able to choose a file. Okay. For instance, let's render that. Notice that now at the bottom we have this choose file. See that? It renders, and just by saying type equal file. What this does is that it provides you with a widget. If you click on it, it provides you with a widget where you can navigate your file system. You can navigate the file system and choose a file. And maybe you can select maybe this file. So you can select it, and it tells you that's the file you selected. Okay, right? If you didn't choose anything, it'll say no file chosen. Okay, it doesn't actually upload a file. Right? It doesn't actually do anything with the file. It only tells the browser that that is the file you selected. Right? You can also select multiple files. You can select 1, 2, maybe 3 files. Actually, you have to say multiple. You can select multiple, and then we'll create an array of files that you've selected for upload, for instance. But to do upload, we need something on the server, right, to catch that file, right, and copy it on the server. We don't know how to do that just yet. Okay. And what else? We need. We also have radio buttons. Let's talk about radio buttons. So radio buttons, like the name suggests, are buttons that are they're meant for you to select something that is mutually exclusive. You choose one or the other. You cannot choose both. Okay. Let's see something in the chat. Do we specify the selected file? Wait, do we specify the selected file is an image in homework for the Twitter part? No, for the Twitter part, I think it's just to have a file input. an input file. That's it. But you don't have to specify an actual anything. So radio buttons are useful for selecting one of many. Just like your drop down allows you to select one thing. Well, you can accomplish the same thing with radio buttons. Okay, but more verbose, more lines of code. So let's copy that and let's go over that. Okay. And so let's render that. And there's our input fields. And again, you have science fiction is default. Notice that they're mutually exclusive. When I click on one, right, the other one is unselected. So they know about each other. Somehow they know that if I click on one, the other one needs to be unselected. Right? They're mutually exclusive. How do I achieve that? Now, the way we achieve the fact that they are mutually exclusive is that they have the same name. All right. So let's take a look at this in more detail. Okay. So we have a label, favorite movie genre, and we have several input fields. So there's several radio buttons. Okay. We have one radio button here. There's one radio button, and then a label. One radio button and a label. Radio button, label, blah 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 blah. Right. So the first one is creating a radio button whose value is comedy, right? And then the label is comedy. And notice that it's saying that it's for radio comedy, ID radio comedy. Okay, this one's the same, but the ID is radio drama. This one's radio sci-fi, and this is radio fantasy, right? Those are the IDs and the for. Okay, but notice that I have the names: radio genre. See that? Radio genre. Okay, and that's how they know that they are related to one another, and they need to be mutually exclusive, right? This question in the chat. It says, sorry, what was BR for? Yeah, BR is a break, line break. Yeah, if I don't put the line break, it would all render next to each other, left, from left to right. Right? They render in an inline as opposed to blocks. Okay. Let me demonstrate for you the importance of the name. So say I put here an input field, input, and the type is radio, okay, and ID is yes1, okay, and then I have a label here for yes1, and this is yes. Okay, let's render that. Oops. There's my yes down here. See that? And let's add a break. Well, that's not a break. Let's add now a no. Let's add a no. Call this no one. Right, and the value is no one. Perfect. Excellent. Notice that if I render this, and this is no. Put this no. Label no. Render. Okay. So notice if I click on yes, it checks, right? And we know that if you ask a question that it's either yes or no, you can't answer both, right? It makes sense, right? That the question have one or the other, that they're mutually exclusive. They can't be at the same time yes and at the same time no, unless you're my wife. That is, she will at the same time say yes and no. Anyway, so if I click on no here, notice that it's not mutually exclusive, right? It's allowing me to select both of them. Why did that happen? Why are these mutually exclusive, but not these? And the reason is that they don't have a name associated. So they don't know that they're somehow related to one another. Say you have a question, you have one question, question one, and the answer is either yes or no. Say you have another question, right? Another question, let's copy this. And you have question two. And the ID here would be yes two. Yes two. And this would be no two. No two. So you have two questions here. Yeah, right? Okay, I can say yes to one and no to the other. But I haven't stopped the fact that I can select no for yes and no for question one and yes and no for question two. Right? So how do we achieve the mutually exclusivity? Right? The way we achieve that is that they have to have the radio buttons that are going to be mutually exclusive, they have to have the same name so that they know that they're related to one another, right? Question in the chat. For a single page, does the ID need to be? Yes, within a page, the ID has to be. Yep. Yeah, so let's give this a name. I'm gonna say name, and this is gonna be question 1, right? And if I give the same name to this radio button here, okay, and I refresh. Now, if I could yes and no, notice that they're mutually exclusive. See that? The other two are still not mutually exclusive. Let's fix that. Okay, let's give a name here to and say this is the question 2. And then this will be question 2. And then when I refresh, notice that indeed they are now mutually exclusive. Make sense? All right. All right, so finally, let's do one more, checkboxes. So checkboxes, unlike radio buttons, they are not mutually exclusive, right? They're meant for you to be able to choose several, right? Which says, well, no, I don't want to just select comedy or science fiction. I like both of them. I like comedy and science fiction, right? So to accomplish that, checkboxes also use the same technique of using names to know that they are somehow related to one another. This checkboxes. Let's look at the rendering here. We have there's our input with comedy, right? And is of type check. Notice that it's let me put these attributes in individual lines. This is also good practice to make sure that these are all in one line so that it's easier to read for everybody else. Remember, when you're coding, you're not coding for yourself, right? You're coding for your team, right? At some point, a team member is going to have to fix your code, right? So any way you can make it easier for your team member to make their lives easier, right? That's a win. So yeah, so there's a checkbox. The value is comedy. Notice it has a name, check genre, and the ID, I'm using the ID for 4 so that they know about it chose, so I can click on comedy, right? And the checkbox checks, right? Again, that's a good practice to increase the clickable area, especially for small devices like phones and tablets and whatnot. Yes. So yeah, notice that all these input fields have the same name. See that? Name, check genre. Okay, that's very important, right? Because that's how you group together different checkboxes, right? So because you could have some checkboxes for a question, another set of checkboxes for another question, and then another set of checkboxes for some other question, right? And whereas in radio buttons, the value for the name will have one value, right? Because only one of them can be checked. On a radio button, you'll get an array. Right? If you ask what is the value of the check genre, right? It'll come back with an array with all the values, right, that are checked. Fantasy, sci-fi, drama, the ones that have been checked. There'll be an array of all the values that you have selected. Okay. All right. Let's see. What time is it? 8:35. What else do we have? Anchor tag. Okay, so the rest is the build mostly, right? And so yeah, we might, if you have questions about the build, perhaps we can address them in the office hours. Okay, so there's a question on the chat. Go back to radio buttons where you add name. Sure. Let's take a look at the radio button. Here, question these guys. Was this what's the question you have here about this? What's up? Oh, no questions. Can we go back to where you at name? Just wanted to take. Yeah. No, all the source code, I'm going to push it to GitHub and I'm going to make it available to everybody, so you can download it and clone it and then use it for your own. You mentioned something about increasing the clickable area. Can you please reiterate that? Yes. So here, so notice how this renders. I'm clicking on the yes, and I'm clicking on the no, right? Notice that if I don't have the ID, if I don't have this ID, I remove it, and I remove the 4. Notice that this renders the same way. Okay. And so if now if I click on yes, notice that the radio button is not being selected. The no still works, right? The yes, this yes works, this no works perfectly, right? But not this yes, not anymore, because we have not associated this label with the input field. Right? That means that I'm making it that much harder for the user to have to, go in and press those 10 pixels, right? And that makes us that much, especially on small screens, right? Phones and tablets where they have to peck at it. Right? So a best practice is to, as much as possible, reasonable is to increase the clickable area as much as possible, within reason, right? To make it easier for the users, okay, and perhaps split it up into multiple screens, right? Instead of munging everything together, right? And just make it wider. Okay, that's a good practice. Okay. All right, any other questions? For graduate students, the challenge a part of the assignment or is it optional? So for the graduate students, the challenge is required. We have to do the challenge. For the undergrads, it's optional. They can play around with it if they want. And if they really need, a booster in the grade to boost their grade for passing or something like that, then I could consider if they work on those challenges, that definitely could help them boost their grade. But that will be considered case by case. The clickable area is controlled by the label, the ID here in HTML. What controls it in real implementation? If I want to add more space for a click. Yeah, so exactly, very good question, right? So if you look at this, if I right click here and say inspect, okay, you'll notice that the label in the input field, okay, they're fairly small. They're fairly small, okay, and you can use CSS. You can use CSS to increase the area. You increase the area, the width. Right? You say width. You can change it to 100 pixels. Okay, or you can make the you can put the input field inside of the label, right? And make this a block, display a block. Right now we've increased the space, and made it much bigger to click. See that? So even if I click out here, it's selecting no. Right? So we'll see that using CSS, you can fairly increase the clickable area, right? For increasing like a big rectangle, so that you can't miss it. Yep. All right, so I'm going to hold office hours today. Right now, if you want to take a quick break, let's take maybe a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back and we can do office hours. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to stop recording, and I'm going to take a quick break. I'll be right back, and then you can stay here, logged in to this Zoom, and where we can just hold the office hours right here. Okay. All right. Be right back. All right. Well, welcome back. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. All right. Okay. How can I help you?
Professor, I have one question. Can you please go to the assignment page number 13?
See. Okay.
Page number 13. It's second paragraph, line 6. Yeah, this. Line 6, second paragraph. It's written second paragraph. I mean third paragraph.
This one?
Yes, it's written add a 6th line. It's written add a handle at Alice. So how can we do this
Let's
particular
see.
thing?
Add a link reference to labels Alice. Add a handle at Alice and a timestamp. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? What's
So
the
my
question?
question is, I'm a little bit confused about how can I add a handle at Alice?
Oh, it's just literally that. Just putting the at sign, right? The and
In
then
paragraph, right.
and then Alice. Just that. So that it renders like this. The only difference is that Alice is a hyperlink that links to profile.html, but at Alice is not a hyperlink, right? So if I click it, it's not going to go anywhere. That's the only difference. I call it a handle. I think that's the correct term, right? When when you have a username or something, right? You display it with an at in front of it. Like if you're using Stack Overflow, not Stack Overflow, what is it? Slack or any of these or Twitter or whatever, you can reference somebody by putting at and then their username, and then it becomes a link.
Yeah, now I got it.
Yeah,
Thank
I think it's called a handle. I think that's the correct
yes.
term.
Tag type something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
like
you,
a tag.
Professor.
Yeah.
Can I also ask a question with this page?
Yeah, go ahead.
So do we need to put like the vertical line between the reply, retweet, and like?
Yeah. You try to make it look as close as possible. So that's the, yeah, that's a vertical line above the backslash.
So vertical line right in front of the retweet and then in front of the like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Later on we'll make it. We could remove that using and use CSS instead. It's that it looked funny without having some kind of divider between these 4 links.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Professor. I had a question similar to that. A lot of the HTML that gets rendered after typing the code doesn't really look like that image without styling, and it's just kind of like very like blocky and like chunky. Does it have to follow that? So do we need to type some CSS to fix it up, or
No, you don't use CSS whatsoever. We're going to be using CSS next week. It doesn't have to look identical to this, but fairly close, with no styling, whatever the no styling is, whatever. I think the reason mine looks this way is because I had maybe mine squished like on half the page, like on the side while I coded. So when I took a snapshot of the screen, it came out reduced, like a column as opposed to like a long paragraph.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, Professor. So
Hi.
on the same line, so say if we add some extra, line break in the code, so does the grading system, catch it as anomaly?
Say again? What?
So
Say again?
let's say in the HTML code for the assignment 2, so if we are to experiment, let's say with the width and height of the image and add different values than what is mentioned in the doc that you have shared. So will that be okay, or do we need to?
Yeah, no, try to make it as close as what we say to do. Otherwise, you're going to generate a lot of questions from the TA. Do I take points off? Do I not take points off? And so let's make it just easy to grade, and so that everybody does the same thing.
Gotcha.
And when you get to the project, then there you can experiment all you want.
Okay.
So try to keep it as close as what we have.
Sure.
Okay. What else?
What's the dot right next to the 2H?
Oh, again, it was just to separate the Alice and the dot and the 2H. I think if you go to Twitter, I think there's like a dot between the handle and the time, like a timestamp.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be like a dot. It can be any sort of divider, right?
Yes, be any
okay.
divider.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Just one last question. So like going back to like the divider stuff, if we like miss any of that, will we be docked points? Or does that, it's not really important?
The dividers.
Yeah.
I forget if I put that as a. I don't think so. I don't think so. But I would not take chances and do it as close as possible. Again, so that there's no case for interpretation or TAs, because then you're going to generate tons of questions from the TAs. Should I do this? Should I do that?
Okay.
I had a question about something on this page. So the last line in this paragraph, it says instead of Alice and at Alice, use your first name. So should I just like replace my name with Alice for like this and Bob's? Because I think Bob,
Right. Yes. So below the tweet, add reply, blah 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 blah, links to reply. Yeah. Include. Yeah. Right. So instead of Alice, put your name. Yes.
okay. And then
yeah.
sorry.
Go ahead.
So for like reply, retweet, they have their own HTML like files. Do we need to generate those files right now, or can we just keep them?
No, only generate the ones we talked about. Only the ones I tell you to create.
Okay, so like when you're like Twitter /home.html, just create that, not the sub file.
Right. So if I don't tell you to create reply or retweet or anything, don't create.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah,
Also
whatever
pro-
is not explicitly said in the assignment, you don't have to do. And if you do lose points, if you do lose points for something that is not explicitly on the homework, let me know and we'll give you point back.
Professor, same is for we do not have to create profile.html.
Yes, you do have to do profile because it's down here, I believe, yeah, profile, see?
Okay.
Hi, Professor.
Yes.
Yeah, I want to ask a question about the challenge part. So for challenge part, are we supposed to have the image as the same as you give us, or we can just modify the link or the width and the width or the color, something like that?
Like what? Like for instance, the bottom
Yeah.
drawings.
Yeah, you say you feel free to change the links.
Oh
or
yeah, there it is. Yeah, feel
Google
free to change.
Slides.
Yeah, if I say feel free to change, then that's the only thing you can change.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. Thank you.
Again, I'm trying to reduce the cases where there might be misinterpretations and,
Okay.
and a whole bunch of edge cases, and there's like 200 students, and
Yeah.
we don't want people going off and doing their own thing and then just making it harder to grade.
I see. Thank you very much.
Yeah. I used to be very lenient and tell students, yeah, sure, blah, 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 right? You're free to do this, free to do that. And the TAs would always get mad at me because then we would create so much more work for grading, because, oh, well, you said yes to this, yes to that. And that just makes it really, really hard to maintain a consistent grading.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you.
Well, also in the home screen, there's also like a couple of lines. Do you want us to add those as well with the HR thing?
Home. Here?
No. If you scroll down a little bit more,
Here, okay.
yeah, there you see those lines that is in the picture.
Oh, these lines, yeah, those are rulers, HRs.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Professor, I
Yes.
have a question about homework 1.
Homework, okay.
Yeah, about the last part that is create a remote source repository.
One.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did the same thing as you've written, but it looks some different.
What do you mean? Which part? What's different?
Yeah, it's here. Adding the committing code.
Yep. What's different?
It says nothing to commit.
Did you add something?
Yeah.
You want to share your screen? Can you show me?
Okay. So, share my screen.
Oh, maybe I need to allow.
Yeah.
How do I do that? Advanced, multiple participants can share. One person can share at a time. One with multiple, only hosts, all participants. Who can start sharing when someone else is sharing? Okay, go ahead. Can you try sharing?
It looks that I couldn't.
I think I opened it for everybody. One participant can share at a time. Multiple participants can share at a time. And settings, multiple. Yeah, try now.
Okay. Can you see?
Okay, there we go. I can see your screen. Okay. Okay. Where are you now? Web dev. Can you do a PWD? Can you type PWD? Enter. Okay. Well, I can do an LS. Oh, there's nothing. So there's you're not. Where did you create your project? Where's your code?
Well, user admin 2021 and
Yeah, that directory is empty. LS came back with empty. There's nothing in there.
yeah.
So you need to go where you created the project.
Will I create a project?
Yeah. Where did you create the project?
No.
Yeah, you have to do all this first, right? You have to. So that's page 5. You have to create it first. First, you have to install Node. Do you have Node installed? Can you show me? Do Node?
Do Node.
No. Type just Node. Type Node. Enter. Okay, you have Node. Control C out of here. Control C.
Control C.
Again. There we go. Yeah, you need to create the project first, right? And it's on page. You start all over from the beginning. It says install Node. You're going to create a directory. Okay, you did create the directory. Very good. And then
did I miss something? I just registered this course.
yeah, page 3. Page 3 says that you have to create the project. So do npx.
Page 3.
Go down a little bit. Right there. Scroll up a little bit. There we go. See that? npx create React app web dev.
Oh, I did this.
Okay. Then do you remember where you did it? Because it's not in there.
I did it in Git. You mean which documents or which?
In which directory did you do it? Because it's not in here.
Oh, sorry, I forgot it.
Do you remember where you did it?
Oh, sorry, I forgot it.
Okay. Well, then it's doing it again.
Yeah.
And then you're going to go into that directory and you're going to follow those steps.
Sure.
Are you, did you recently join or?
Yeah, I just recently joined.
Yeah. So please reach out to the TAs. I have, I asked them to please help out anybody who recently joined, and they can help you, walk you through this process. So
Sure.
that you can catch up and we're going to just give you a couple more days to finish up the first assignment.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so please reach out to them and they can walk you through this process, okay?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you so
Awesome.
much.
Good luck. Anyone else?
Hello, Professor. Oh,
Hi.
you can go
Yeah.
first.
Okay. So, Professor, I had a question regarding project.
Yep.
So, are we free to use any open source libraries for the
Yes.
project?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yep. You can use if you don't like Node, you can use Java or C# or whatever. If you don't like Mongo, you can use any other database. If you want to try Vue or Angular instead of React, you're free to do that as well.
Okay. Sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Professor. So this isn't about the homework, but I was wondering what the purpose is of the name attribute when we're making checkboxes.
Yeah, for checkboxes is just like you can, when you use it for radio, allows you to group the radio buttons together so that they know about each other, and for that, so that they are mutually exclusive. For the checkboxes, it's so that when you click on a checkbox, it will not uncheck another checkbox, right? Because you can select multiple, and so if you group them together, then that means that when you ask when you retrieve the value for a particular name, it will come back with an array of all the checkboxes that were checked that have the same name, right? So if you checked on comedy and drama, right, and then you ask, okay, that group of radio buttons, what is the value? The value will be one single value, but the value will be an array of values.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Next.
I had a question about homework 1.
Sure.
Or assignment 1. So if we do like git add readme.md and then git commit, after that, in the homework there was another part where we had to do the git add dot.
Yeah, so I believe are you referring to page 5, adding in your code?
So after I did the first part where I added the readme.md, there weren't any changes we had to do between that step and then the next git add, right?
So right. Yes, you're right, because I don't ask you to do anything between the first and that second.
Yeah, so is it okay if we only do
Yeah.
the first one? Because there's no.
Right, because the first one, I don't really tell you to do that. I say, the commands will be similar, blah, 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 blah. Once you create your own, it will display commands that look like this, but I don't actually tell you to do it.
Oh, okay.
In the next step, I do tell you explicitly, copy this, use the commands get suggested for you, and I almost like copy and paste it for you again.
Okay, so
Yeah, but I can see how it could be confusing. Yeah. Right.
I did the first one where I added like a readme.md.
Yeah.
Is that okay, or should I?
Well, so at that point, probably there's nothing really to commit. There, maybe you haven't made any changes. You should always do like a git status. It'll tell you any files that are not committed.
Yeah, so
It'll
I
say-
did do that, and there was nothing that I needed
Yeah,
to
if there's-
commit. Like I did have to commit the
Right.
dot git ignore that we had to change like that
Right.
dot
That-
idea.
yeah,
So
and probably, yeah, that's the only real change that I really ask you to do. And probably that's the only commit that you have to add and you're done. Yeah.
yeah. So is it okay if like I don't know if the TAs have to like take a look if it doesn't
Yeah,
say
no, I mean, then you push it, right?
yeah.
And once it's pushed, then you're gonna go to Netlify and you're gonna deploy that, right? So if it's not pushed, obviously it's not gonna deploy to Netlify. So if you did the right push, if you did the push correctly, then the deployment in Netlify will work correctly, right?
Yeah. So as long as
If it works, you're good.
correctly, then we're good. It doesn't matter what the exact commits are
Yeah,
and everything.
no.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else?
Hey, Professor.
Sure.
I had a quick question. So I didn't get the TA's name until today, so I already started working on A2, but I didn't, I just want to push and commit my A1 just to make sure I have everything. Is it okay that my A1 submission is going to include like half of A2?
Okay, so the problem with that,
Yeah.
is that, well, actually, no. Actually, there's no problem because whatever you push is gonna break the Netlify anyway.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking.
So no, don't worry about it. If you have A2 working or half working, then yeah, then you should be good with A1.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Nothing? All right, if there's nothing else, let's see. Oh, something on the chat. Let's see. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good night. Cheers.